we have multiple crises at the same time. It began with 1 and then 2 and then 3. I'm actually sitting with PM when he called up Putin and Zelensky and took the action which after the phone calls to make it all happen. The relationship has become a victim of Canadian coalition compulsions or political football. We've seen definitely in terms of the Western media a very strong attempt this time, much stronger than previous elections, to kind of shape the direction of choice in India. We have a situation where people who run down our nuclear program praise Pakistan's nuclear program. People actually questioning 2611. People actually saying, oh, Kasab didn't shoot the guy. Imagine today that the politics has driven them to a point of actually defending Kasab. My minister at that time, Salman Khurshid, Chinese came into Depsan and Salman Khurshid said, oh, it's just some acne on the face of a beautiful friendship. Strengthen Narendra Modi's hands because he is actually the guy who's going to see you through this stormy period.
Namaskar. Welcome to Point Blank. We have with us External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar, who's known for not mincing words, a paradox in global diplomacy. Having started as a diplomat 41 years ago and culminating in Foreign Secretary in the first tenure of the Narendra Modi government, he joined the Union Cabinet in 2019 as the External Affairs Minister. He is also the BJP member of Rajya Sabha from Gujarat. In a rapidly changing global scenario, the rise of India and the salience of India is being accentuated by the unrepentant and uncompromising Bharat First stance of Minister Jaishankar. Joining the conversation is Hindustan Times Editor-in-Chief R. Sukumar. Let's start the ball rolling. Mr. Minister, we are in the midst of the 2024 general elections, and the conventional wisdom says that actually foreign policy does not impact a general election which is more on internal issues. Do you think this is the correct statement, or does the foreign policy impact the general elections?
I think two things have changed, and first of all, before I say anything, let me say what a great pleasure it is to be with you both. One, the line between what is foreign policy and what is domestic policy has got blurred. So if you look at something like, let us say, buying Russian oil, at the end of the day, for the consumer, it's domestic policy because it's what you pay in the petrol pump and the inflation. Had you paid more, had we not bought from Russia? So, and there are many other examples like this. I find it very interesting because when I've done about 9 or 10 states during this election. Often I go into a place, need not be a big city, could be a district headquarters, sometimes not even that. And I talk to them about the changes in the country, the domestic changes, the development, the yojanas of various kinds. But I almost invariably get a set of questions on foreign policy. So I think somewhere it has seeped into people's consciousness. What has seeped into it? I think one, a sense of pride about where Prime Minister Modi has taken the country. Number two, an understanding that a danger outside, it could be a pandemic, it could be terrorism, will not stay outside, it will come home. And three, that connect, because today out of smartphones, what they are seeing, they're connected to what is actually happening out there. So it's very interesting. If you look at the BJP manifesto, I think we have given much more space, we ourselves, to foreign policy in this manifesto than we have ever given before. So I think that's a statement in itself.
Things in the external world are in a state of flux.
Sure. That's putting it very mildly.
Yeah, we seem to be moving from one crisis to another.
Yes.
There's Ukraine, there's Gaza, there are terror strikes happening somewhere, there's gunboat diplomacy. What is the way to manage this turbulence?
You actually said we are moving from one crisis to another. In truth, we have multiple crises at the same time. And it began with 1 and then 2 and then 3 and look, impact of COVID still remains. Ukraine war into its third year. Israel-Gaza likely to intensify. Israel-Iran is still smouldering. Attacks, drone attacks, missile attacks, which is impacting shipping in the Arabian Sea, lifeline for all of us, very much a danger. 20 Indian ships out there. Go further east, China trying to pressurize us in the LAC. Pakistan in a perpetual, in fact intensifying crisis. Pakistan, Afghanistan getting very tense. Keep going further up South China Sea, maritime disputes. Then US-China competition, which is competition plus in many ways. Russia, West. So, and then on top of it, if you look, other regions have their own, terrorism, governance issues. So, I actually would say if one objectively assesses the state of the world, it's actually very, very, today, very turbulent, very volatile, with every prospect of it actually getting more complicated. So, what can we do to respond to it? I think the most important thing we can do is actually have an experienced, sober, practical, grounded but courageous leadership which can take the calls, because we'll have to keep making calls. We'll have to make a call like we did about our students in Ukraine. We'll have to make a call, do we buy Russian oil or not buy Russian oil? We have to take a call, do we bend to Chinese pressure on Quad or stand up to Chinese pressure, because we bent many, many years ago in 2007. So, we'll have calls in our neighborhood, So, I think today my message, when I go out and people actually ask me, because as I said, there's a lot of interest in the country today. People ask me, okay, thank you very much, you spelled out the nature of the world. So, what do we do? And my honest answer to them is strengthen Narendra Modi's hands, because he is actually the guy who's going to see you through this stormy period. That you need a very firm, steady, experienced pair of hands on the tiller as we navigate these turbulent waters.
And also a very clear idea of what our position is, right? What we stand for, what we want.
And not just clear, I think very confident. A sense of what we are, what we were, what we are, what we should be, and how do I get that?
So, I just wanted to ask you, while we are on the, how Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the leader that he is, what is the actual story behind this Modi ji ne war rukwa di papa? Is it a fact?
It's become a meme now.
No, you know why I laughed? I laughed because in this campaign, I would call it the number one FAQ for me. People are genuinely interested, genuinely curious, and the interesting thing is, very often, by the way, I've had functions from Orissa to Maharashtra where students or families of students who came out of Ukraine wanted to come up to the stage to thank us for it. So you ask me, what's the...
did he sort of, get the ceasefire done at Sumi to get the students
There were
back?
two episodes. The first episode was in Kharkiv. In Kharkiv, Kharkiv was being subjected to artillery shelling. And in fact, one of our students actually lost his life from Karnataka. Now, to get them out, we had worked out a safe zone where the students would leave the Kharkiv city, walk out there because no other mode of transport. We had to spend a lot of time, encouraging them, counseling them, saying, look, you need to reach that place. And then we had a designated time period where the buses would go and pick them up. Now, while this was under progress, to our complete surprise, we saw that shelling started again. Shelling started very close to the vicinity of that safe zone and on the way. So, on that occasion, Prime Minister spoke to President Putin and specifically told him, look, this was an agreement between your people and our people. This is happening. So, I would request you to personally have someone look into this and stop it. which it did. It took a few hours, but the Russian shelling stopped. The people went there, the buses went there, picked them up and brought them out. I think the one which, what you are referring
Yes.
to, this happened a little bit later. Now, the timing is important because what happened was pretty much everybody else in Ukraine had got out or was getting out, and this one place was stuck. Okay, it was, I would say it was northwest of Kharkiv, and it was a particularly complicated place because other than the Russian military and the Ukrainian military, there was also a kind of an Ukrainian militia which didn't seem to be under anybody's particular command and control. So everybody was firing at everybody. And the students started getting more and more agitated because they felt everybody else was leaving, you know. So, and we used to have people talking continuously to them and saying, look, hold on, don't take risks, trust us, we'll get you out. But you can understand, you know, from their point of view, the tensions. Now, at one point, we thought we had worked out everything. We even sent a set of buses to go and pick them up and bring them out. And as bad luck would have it, that day as they were boarding the buses, there was intense firing. So they went back. Fortunately, nobody got hurt.
This is at Sumi.
Sumi.
Yeah.
But then, you know, they had a crisis of confidence. You know, I mean, here we are telling them, saying, get into the bus, and there's firing. So this time, they actually were very insistent, saying, look, we are not going to come out unless we are absolutely assured of a way out. So we took two calls. One, that two of our very senior people from MEA who were actually handling this whole thing, who were Russian speakers, we decided we will send them to Sumi. So we actually put them on a flight and said, okay, just go out there, reach the Romanian border, find something Indian jugaad at its best, but get out there. Because when the student sees somebody coming from India, immediately the morale goes up. I mean, if there's a way in, there's a way out. But the way out had to be secured. So I requested PM saying that, look, you will have to speak to Putin and to Zelensky, which he was very willing to do. And he actually spoke to both of them and told them saying, look, this is very, very important. We want your forces to stand down and give us a pathway. And my officials will work out the details. So they passed the instructions down. So we actually worked out a pathway, which was also very difficult because the two had different opinions about what the pathway
kind of a safe zone.
So there was a safe zone, a no firing zone from Sumi, I think, down to a place called Poltava. But a good bit of it was actually previously a firing zone. So that day for about, I would say almost about half a day till everybody was out. Both sides, in fact all three, the militia also respected that no firing rule, and that's actually how they came out. So others may have heard the story or think I'm actually the person in a way who's a witness to it. I mean, who's actually sitting with PM when he called up Putin and Zelensky and took the action which after the phone calls to make it all happen.
So that means the ad was absolute truth.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In January, we were supposed to have a Quad summit, which has been pushed off. No future date has been set. Has the grouping taken a back seat?
No, not at all. Look, I'll tell you what happened in January. We felt it would be useful if we could get in everybody in that January 26th. I would say that last 10 days of January zone. We ran into problems with every one of them. The Americans had a State of the Union problem. The Australians had their own National Day on January 26th. The Japanese were going through some political turbulence at that time. So, like a Venn diagram, I had to get 4 overlaps out there. And frankly, that became a problem. And once we missed the January window, we had to say, look, now Parliament is starting, we are moving into elections. So, we couldn't then physically arrange to it. But I don't think it's really had any material impact on the progress of the Quad. That continues. Everybody is very strongly committed to it. I can tell you, as Quad ministers, we talk 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 or sometimes 1-to-3 regularly. There's a Quad Sherpa meeting which on our side Foreign Secretary does. They have regular meetings. So things are moving well in Quad. More and more things are getting added on, and you will see. I mean, once the elections are over and the new government is formed, that there will be things related to Quad which will immediately pick up. So Quad's in good shape, fine fettle, ready to do more. In fact, in many ways, I would say I find it very interesting. More and more countries actually want to work with Quad. Even ASEAN, which initially had some reticence about it, today there's a much greater enthusiasm about it.
There were two schools of thought. One, and this has to do with the Pannun incident in the US. One was that the US and India would compartmentalize this problem and deal with it in isolation, and everything else would continue. All the other work would continue. And the other one was that it would actually affect relationships. Can you give us a sense of how the investigation committee's work is going?
I agree with you that there are two schools of thought. One school of thought is Narendra Modi will never succeed and should never succeed. And if something, any problem, this is the end of it and it's going to never recover from it. So there is a kind of a professional pessimist school. Then there are the practical guys like us who have a good sense of the world, whose job it is to deliver, and we keep at whatever we're doing. The problem is also that, we think it will not, that there will be problems, sometimes disguises, we wish there are problems. And in the case of America, there's a latent, there's a hangover from the past as well. There's always been a body of, there's a certain ideological...
There's always been distrust for one section.
For one section, okay. That section, by the way, also has a problem with the current Prime Minister of India and the current... So the two kind of come together. So look, in the case of the Pannu episode, the Americans brought to our attention certain data points, okay. The data points were specific enough, serious enough for us to say, okay, it warrants us investigating it, because it wasn't just the implication for them. We also, in those data points, assess certain implications for ourselves. So I think that is going on. But beyond that, is there anything I would like to say in public? My answer is no. I would not like to say in public.
So while we are on the Pannu issue, I would want you to talk about the allegation that was made by the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau last year in Canadian Parliament, where he virtually accused the Modi government of orchestrating the murder of the Khalistan terrorist, that is Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Mm-hmm. Now, they have already arrested people over there, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but there is no evidence per se right now to link India. Now, the question is, what does the Canadian Prime Minister trying to do when he actually tries to sort of, go after a relationship, bilateral relations, by invoking issues which do not exist or for which there is no evidence?
Shishir, here is the problem. There can be issues between countries, okay? I mean, it's not unknown. If I have a issue vis-a-vis country X, I would either go to that country and say, evidence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, please give me your view on it. Okay. Or I would say, I have investigated it and now come to a point where I think you have something to do with it. Okay. In this case, actually we are seeing neither. We have not been given anything specific to go on, which we can say becomes a basis for our own investigation. Nor, to the best of my understanding, because even now, even these arrests of whoever, there were some people living in Canada, who have gone there, and we have seen the Canadian system has been obviously very lax in porous, like call it what you will. There's clearly the diligence, the oversight of who comes in, but this is a problem they're going to face. Okay, so we haven't seen, to the best of my understanding, if you look even at the press conference out there, they are still in presuppositions. It is, we think somebody connected with India may have something to do with it. So we are still after, it's now getting to a year from when Prime Minister Trudeau said what he did. But we are still very much at the level of suppositions, inferences, imputations. So I
No
have
hard
no
evidence
choice.
has been produced.
I have no choice but to conclude
So
that
then
there is
why-
actually a my answer to you, I think there's a political agenda at work, that today he and presumably his political constellation see some advantage in pointing fingers at us, in creating a certain I would say narrative, and they think, I assume, that they will get some political advantage out of it. Now, I'm also conscious of the fact that I think they are reliant on some other parties for support in Parliament, and I think some leaders of those parties are also stoking the fire. So, frankly, in a way, I would say the relationship has become a victim of Canadian coalition compulsions or political football or whatever, call it what you will.
Don't you think the matter is much more sinister, because there is an election that is going on in Punjab, the general election, and if you start sort of defaming India and talking about as if the leadership of the NDA and the BJP is involved in such an activity, the Sikh community within Punjab itself would sort of have a colored image of what's happening. So don't you think they're trying to influence the election in Punjab itself?
I think that's a hypothesis which needs to be very carefully examined. What I can tell you is, we've seen definitely in terms of the Western media a very strong attempt this time, much stronger than previous elections, to kind of shape the direction of choice in India. It's almost like they are also a political participant in our democratic process. I can see that there are interests at work. We are not born yesterday. We know the realities today of the globalized politics. To some extent, we also know that there are people in the country who have made no secret of the fact that they rely on people outside the country to support them. So there is an in and out combo really at work, and it takes different forms. You attack institutions, you call into question the integrity of the value of the democratic process. It takes different forms. Now, whether in case of Punjab a lot of it was designed to do that, I'm a responsible minister. I'm very careful about what I say in public. So at this moment, I think it would be prudent of me to stop there.
Customary question on Pakistan. We have only one. Prime Minister.
That's, by the way, an improvement. Nowadays, there are many interviews where people don't even ask me anything about Pakistan.
Prime Minister Modi said in a recent interview that he'd sort of put a lock or a freeze on bilateral relations with Pakistan.
That's not my recollection. I think essentially what he said is, look, that era where we referenced our policy on Pakistan That era is over. Pakistan is no longer a reference point for me. In our business, we call it real dehyphenation. That my trajectory is up. Pakistan's is in a different direction. My numbers look good. You know their numbers. So, if you take any dimension today by which you will evaluate a country, applied to Pakistan, applied to India, I think the story is very clear. So, I think what he was trying to say is, yes, we have a neighbor, but that old habit in India that, when are you going to talk to them, should we not be engaging them, that era is now behind us. We will assess them for what they are and we will deal with them accordingly.
India Alliance leaders who actually said, that you need to talk to Pakistan because unke paas atom bomb hai.
Yes, there were people there and it's interesting. Some of them are the people who run down our own nuclear program. So, we have a situation where people who run down our nuclear program praise Pakistan's nuclear program. I think, my sense is today the country sees through it, is dismissive about it. In a way, it's a kind of inherited mindset, but I think it's also a rationalization. It's a rationalization for not doing anything for so long or actually positively doing bad things. So, it's a rationalization, for example, don't do anything on POK. That is Farooq Saab's message.
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
Okay. So, here you have the entire country on one side, you have the parliament resolution on one side, and then you have someone with that kind of long record in Kashmir who is actually saying, no, don't leave POK alone. If you look at terrorism, this time we have actually seen some pretty strange things. People actually questioning 26/11. People actually saying, Kasab didn't shoot the guy. We have now, imagine today that the politics has driven them to a point of actually defending Kasab. So, I feel, you should connect the dots. The nuclear dot, the terrorism dot, the inaction dot, the vote bank dot. There is a world view out there. That's how they rationalize not doing anything after 26/11. This is why they attack what we did on 370. This is how they tried to make CAA into an issue. This is how they tried to run down Balakot Uri. So, I think there's a kind of as I said, mindset out there, and it has other dimensions, and some of those dimensions can be very troubling. I think there is a suspicion of our armed forces. There's a hostility towards robust national security. There's actually a kind of a allergy to a nationalism which is today very strong in the country. But I think a few people clearly can't countenance that. So, they even try to make out as though that kind of feeling is somehow unnatural and wrong. I think a large part of the country doesn't share it.
So, while on the armed forces, you had gone to the Election Commission.
Yes.
To petition them on the statement of Rahul Gandhi. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, we actually went to the Election Commission for the reason that we have continuously been pointing out to them violations of the Model Code of Conduct. I gave to the Election Commission along with my colleagues 22 examples where we have pointed out to them and they have not taken action. So, our point to them is, listen, you the Election Commission, it was your Model Code of Conduct, you are supposed to be enforcing it. We are now bringing it to your attention. So, please, do it, because if you don't do it, you are only encouraging more violations of the Model Code of Conduct. So, that was the main reason. Now, in that context, when we were looking at various issues of concern, one very, very serious issue of concern which came to us was really what Rahul Gandhi said about the Indian military. Essentially what he said, I'll summarize it to you, is that Narendra Modi has created two categories of soldiers. One are the soldiers of the poor families, the backward, the minority families, and one are the children of rich families. And that we treat the two differently, and if they happen, God forbid, something happens to them, the benefits or the response of the military would be very different. This is incredibly dangerous because you are now attacking the institution of the army. You are now saying that the army runs a two-track military system, which is a downright lie. It's not just lie. I mean, just imagine the morale and the mindset implications of this for the military. It was bad enough you had Revant Reddy's questioning Balakot. Okay, as I said, you had, but today what we pointed out is that kind of mindset, because Rahul Gandhi, some time ago had actually, there was a Chinese attempt at a place called Yangtze in Arunachal. This is about 2 years ago. And then he stood up and said, "Hamare jawano ki pitai hui hai." Actually, our guys pushed the Chinese back. But look at the words and look at the you don't check facts. Maybe he checked and maybe he deliberately came up with an alternative reality. So this sort of, I would say, almost a kind of a innate hostility to the security forces, and inside, outside the country. I mean, we do a left-wing extremist counter operation. What does that guy in Chhattisgarh say? Oh, that must be an encounter. So it's hostility to police, it's hostility to paramilitary, it's hostility to the military. Now, I can understand politics, but if you take politics to start questioning your institutions, your security forces, you're doing great damage to this country. And we felt very, very strongly that, in fact, I told my colleagues, I said, look, put those 22 complaints. Okay, I've given that letter, I'll do it. But when I come out, I said, I want to speak about this issue. I want to tell people, this man is doing today something very dangerous. Because whatever else you do, you don't mess with the army. You don't lower the morale of your soldiers. That is to me completely out of bounds. I mean, I'm normally a person, you would have seen, I very rarely, criticize something in strong, forceful terms. I mean, that's not my nature. But I felt very strongly about this today.
You spoke about China, and what is the situation right now on the LAC?
What is the situation on the LAC is both of us today remain forward deployed, which means we are deployed well ahead of what were our traditional bases and camps. Secondly, we are deployed in very much larger numbers than we were deployed before 2020. We are also deployed with very much more weaponry than we were deployed before 2020. They did it first, we responded to it. So they are the responsible party for it. In terms of the issue today, what we are discussing, right now the focus is on the patrolling. Both of us used to patrol from our traditional bases to the LAC, and there was like a patrolling pattern. We know theirs, they know us, and that's how it used to work. The patrolling patterns have got disrupted. The patrolling patterns in some cases have got blocked. So right now the focus is on the, how do we get the patrolling issues resolved. Yeah. Thereafter, there could be a discussion about the troops, the weapons, that's the de-escalation side. But we feel first this patrolling issue needs to be resolved.
I want to elaborate on this particular issue. The India Alliance leaders have been first they talked about some model village in Arunachal Pradesh, which has been built during the NDA regime. Then they talked about nibbling of territory in East Ladakh. Now they're talking in terms of the Siachen Glacier is being threatened by a road that is being made by the Chinese in the Shaksgam Valley, which has been illegally ceded by Pakistan. Now, you are an expert on China, and you've served in China as an ambassador. You know what it is. Can you tell us the bare details as to what is really happening?
Let me use those examples. Maybe I would give one or two also on my own side. Model village. Are the Chinese building these model villages in inverted commas? Yes. What was the village which became the subject of controversy. It is in a place called Longju.
Yes.
Okay. If you check the records of the Indian Parliament, or you read any book on our border problem with China, the Chinese came in 1959, attacked if I remember rightly, the Assam Rifles, which was holding that post. There were casualties on our side. The Chinese captured Longju in 1959. Then there was discussion with them. Chinese came back in 1962, this time captured it in entirety and held it.
This is the Nehru era.
Where is that model village coming up? The model village is coming up in Longju with Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in 1959 told Parliament, I'm sorry, but it has gone out of my hands. Okay. The second example which they cited was a bridge. Okay. There is a bridge which is being constructed on the northern side of the Pangong Tso Lake. If one looks at the coordinates of that bridge, it is close to a place called Kurnak Fort. The Chinese came to Kurnak Fort in 1958, and that particular part of Pangong Tso, that segment, they actually illegally occupied it in the 1962 war. Okay. So, they are today building a bridge in a part of Indian territory which they occupied in 1962. Now, these were two examples of which they made such a hoo-ha, including Rahul Gandhi. The recent one which came up during the campaign, actually Pawan Khera, their spokesman, said, you know, under Modi, we are actually now even risking Siachen because a road is being built out of Shaksgam Valley which has implications for the security of Siachen. Now, Shaksgam Valley was in 1949, Jawaharlal Nehru allowed it to become part of Pakistan occupied Kashmir by accepting a ceasefire and not pressing our attack on Pakistan further. Then in 1963, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto as foreign minister did an agreement with the Chinese and handed over 5,180 square kilometers of that territory to the Chinese. So, look at this clever sleight of hand. Nehru let it happen, Bhutto handed it over to Chinese, and now you are saying Modi has a culpability in it. Now, what they are gambling on is, you know, a young person today would have no sense of all of this. So, if you tell them, "Arey, Modi ji ke samne ho gaya, CHN khatra mein hai," nobody is going to, you know, do this kind of diligence and go and check, and they will just say, okay, this is our land, because if you look at the map of India, it falls within the map of India, and say, yeah, our land, you know, they are building a road out there. So, I actually regard this as downright dishonest. I think from the start, because, you know, China is a very interesting example. The Congress party has actually practicing a very sort of clever doublespeak issue. On the one hand, Rahul Gandhi will actually meet the Chinese ambassador secretly while Doklam is going on. Okay. On the other hand, he will claim to be a great nationalist outside. Okay. Even in 2013, I mean, look, I was the ambassador then. One of the most embarrassing things which happened to me was my minister at that time, Salman Khurshid. Chinese came into Depsang and Salman Khurshid said, oh, it's just some acne on the face of a beautiful friendship. I mean, these were guys coming into your, crossing the LAC and coming in. And he was dismissive of it. Okay. Now, if you look at it, their posture here, please read Rahul Gandhi's speeches on China, because he has a sense he knows a lot. Maybe he does. He doesn't attack the Belt and Road. Belt and Road violates our sovereignty. But the Congress party is very, very cautious about it. You can actually sense his admiration for China, great, you know, great civilization coming back, great manufacturing power. So, there is admiration there, secret meetings here, nationalist posture somewhere in between, and they think they can juggle these balls and keep it going, and then do this historical sleight of hand, you know, 59, 62, 63, park it on Narendra Modi 2024. What can I say?
While on China, while we've been looking at what the India Alliance said, and there is one actually India Alliance leader who actually said that, that he will get the land back. This is part of his 10 guarantees.
I think if the rest of his guarantees are of the same quality as this guarantee, then all I can say is God help the people of Delhi. Because, clearly he has no idea what he's talking about. If he can reverse what his partner of the India Alliance did in 1962, I think then he should owe it to the alliance. One alliance partner saw 38,000 kilometers of territory going to China. The other one says, okay, I'll take it back. Please, as an intra-alliance issue, be my guest, let me watch you do it.
One of the things that India has sought to do over the last few years is to emerge as an alternative to China in global supply chains, or as a complement to China, right? The China plus one strategy, with many countries in the Western world wanting to diversify out of China, not put all their eggs in one basket. Is China actively blocking this process in some way? And I'm asking this with the specific focus on what happened with Tesla.
No. There's no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no connection at all between Tesla and supply chains at all. Look, what is happening with supply chains is, there are, to my mind, two broad drivers. One is the manufacturing technology dependence on that over concentration which China managed to get with the complicity of many Western countries, governments and companies. So people woke up to it during COVID and said, oh my God, so many things go through China. So there will be economic de-riskers, there will be political de-riskers. That's like broadly you can say a manufacturing technology supply chain. So their response is really today to multiply the supply chains, to create more resilient, redundant supply chains, to create more centers of production. So it may not even be China plus one, but I'll come to that in a minute. The second driver is actually the digital domain. Because in the digital domain, a digital commodity, a product or service is not the same as a manufactured good. Except that the manufactured good also has a digital in it. This time you are putting data out there. You are allowing somebody to actually know more about you than you would know yourself, because all your habits, your preferences, everything about you individually, collectively, as a group is all there out there. So in the digital world, smart countries today are putting a national security filter on everything that they are doing. Okay. So if you look today, from the most basic is telecom. Once upon a time people thought of 5G is something top of the world. It is today, that's where you take the basic precaution. Okay. It then grows in every direction out of there, smart grids, electric mobility, you name it. So between the desire for manufacturing resilience, multiple options, and digital security, these two concepts today have come: resilient supply chain and trusted vendor. And India today can score big in both. In fact, one of the initiatives of the Modi government has been that a domain like semiconductor, which is so important, today in a way the chips will determine economic growth and even balance of power in many respects. This is the world of AI, it's all about chips. Now we have got left way behind, because you had people in charge of this country who are also anti-manufacturing. Even today Rahul Gandhi and Raghuram Rajan continuously attack any efforts in this country to manufacture. Rahul Rahul Gandhi makes fun of Make in India. Okay? If you do not do manufacturing, I mean, A, you will not get that employment numbers. B, you will not get technology. I mean, nobody builds technology on services. You need manufacturing to build technology. Okay? So, I think today it's absolutely vital for us to look at these new domains. Now, I was a little baffled by the connection you suggested with Tesla, because Tesla has nothing to do with any of this. Tesla already has a long-standing business
In China.
in China. So, I assume that that guy was going to negotiate the past, present and future of his business. That's the best information I saw. What he was discussing with us was a new business. It's not for him an either or. I mean, it's not he's moving his China factory to India, or by going to China, he's not going to act with India. I think the two are, this is a business decision. There is no political implication involved in it. And as someone who spent some time in the world of business, I think you look at existing investments with one lens, you look at new decisions with another lens. Don't confuse the two lenses.
So there's one more question I wanted to ask you about China. China has recently launched the third aircraft carrier Fujian, and there are reports that Chinese would be sending long-range patrols to Indian Ocean, and already they are doing those same exercises in the Indo-Pacific. So you have coercion in South China Sea, you have gunboat diplomacy, and you have a host of countries which are more than happy to accommodate China, particularly in the Indian Ocean, or to name it, maybe like Maldives. How are we prepared to handle China when the PLA Navy expands in such a way next year?
I would say, quite honestly, we need to be very considered in our assessment about which countries will work with China to what degree. Because when countries do work with China, it has both implications, it has costs, it has consequences. If they also happen to be countries in our immediate neighborhood, and we feel something is happening there that has implications for our national security, then we start looking at that country or those sets of countries with the national security as a primary filter. So then the nature of the relationship with that country obviously adjusts.
Changes.
Accordingly. I think in some ways we are also today reaping the consequences of our own misjudgment. 15 years ago, we watched very complacently when the Chinese built Hambantota Port. Okay. At that time, there was a very fashionable description for it called a string of pearls. And a very senior figure in the UPA regime said a string of pearls is a strange murder weapon. I mean, they were completely dismissive of any implications for us, because the underlying thought was that China doesn't threaten us. And I must tell you, as a civil servant, you put up with a lot of things. The government of the day ultimately takes a call, but there was great unease within the system. Just think about it today. Okay. It would be ludicrous to people that China was designated as a strategic partner of India. But we did. There's actually a written agreement. And I still remember one of my earliest conversations, actually of all people, with my colleague now, General V.K. Singh. V.K. Singh, I think, was Eastern Army Commander. He was my first visitor as ambassador. And he asked me, he said, look, explain to me. We have all these problems with this guy. This guy has claims on my territory. He said, you are confusing all of us in the military by designating him as a strategic partner. So we don't know what to make of it. So I think it's important to have a clear sense, because whatever happens to the north, to the south, to the east, west, if we don't have strategic clarity, that's your starting point. if the government of the day begins by confusing its entire system, then what can you say?
Moving on to the elections.
So,
In some ways, your first general elections, although you're not.
yes, sure.
Yeah.
As a politician, yes.
As a politician.
Yes. Seen many as a voter.
How is it to actively campaign in these elections? How is it to speak to voters? What's your biggest learning?
I am actually, I was a bit, I will say, unsure at the start. What had happened in my case was I was quite active in two of the state elections, the Gujarat state election and the Karnataka state phase. But still, I must say, national elections, general elections are clearly a different.
Very different. Okay.
I find it interesting because I would, in the initial stages, think a lot, what should I say? What will they ask me? How do I prepare myself? It took me fairly quickly to understand at the end of the day, actually people want to talk to you. They want to hear from you. And different people have different styles of communication. There are people, if you look at somebody like Prime Minister Modi, to some degree, let us say Home Minister Amit Shah, some of these people are extraordinarily effective in mass communication. Okay, I find I'm much more comfortable and much more effective in doing much more, moving more to a town hall kind of thing. Now, town halls can be pretty big. I mean, I did one in Mumbai day before yesterday. It must have been about 2,000 people. Okay, so it's not a small town hall. Sometimes bigger, 3,000, 4,000 would be some of the. But what it does is you talk to them, you sense really what is it. It can also be a mix of national issues, state issues, some pressing concerns, sometimes constituency issue. That's also there. And I'm learning that a national election is a combination of everything. So for me, you are learning, you are growing, you are sort of, in one way I would say, really enjoying.
So, ab ki baar 400 par?
Oh, I'm pretty confident that when Prime Minister picked that 400 figure, it was with a lot of. He's a very serious person. Okay, so it was picked with a lot of thought, with a lot of understanding of what the ground reality is, and my own experience in some states have been to look. I've done Kerala, where we've never had an MP. Went to Telangana. We have 4 MPs. Went to Odisha. Just came from Bengal. Certainly in the case of Telangana, Kerala, Odisha, I was actually with candidates on the field doing the campaigning. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm there. There is a kind of a groundswell of support. There is a very sort of clear sense that people's lives have become better in the last 10 years. And they attribute it broadly to the government, but personally to the Prime Minister. And I think he understands that.
So, do you think the election has actually crystallized in the favor of the NDA and the BJP?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I have no doubt at all about that. I think the issue is not to be complacent, to get your voters out. This is also learning, that my first election I saw as a student. This was the 1977 election, when we all came out and worked very hard for the Janata Party's victory. But after that, my interest has been largely as a voter. But you realize today the hard work which goes actually into an election. How do you motivate people to come to work, vote? How do you, get the right degree of messaging out to them? I think the BJP and its allies will do a very good job of that. The people are really fired up. You can see that. And I know there's been some debates. My sense is people sometimes are overstretching or sharpening some things which may happen. Sometimes in some places it may be less than what it was in 19. Nobody talks about the places where actually voting is more than where it was in 19, which there are a good number of places that is also happening. Then it's assumed that,
Yeah, that's a very difficult correlation to make anyway.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure that in these town halls especially, there must have been a lot of young people around.
Yes.
I'm particularly curious to know what kind of questions they're asking about India's role in the world.
Since I became a minister, I've actually spent a lot of my time talking to young people, talking to professional people of various kinds, talking to people associated with ex-servicemen, people who I feel are involved with the security of the country. So in that sense, a lot of their concerns and interests I've absorbed over the last 5 years. I find young people are actually very, very taken in with what they believe is greater respect today for India at the world stage. They are fascinated by, they want to go into the nitty-gritty. As I told you, you have no idea how many times this Ukraine issue has come up. And sometimes I actually, because I spend time with them, I actually talk to them about other operations. We did a very risky operation in Sudan. Risky both in terms of actually embassy, embassy people, our embassy was actually physically occupied by one of the combatant sides. People were, there was shooting going on. We had an IAF plane which took extreme risks in landing with very little aid at a very dicey airstrip. So when you actually sit and talk to them, saying, look, in real life, it means all these things. That I tell them stories about how, for example, we organized oxygen supply, the kind of effort we made abroad, or how, there was a time when the US had put a ban on any vaccine ingredients going out. So how we persuaded the US. So they want, there's that desire to know how does the world work, how are we seen, where are we going. And I think that's very much something, here I don't say it as just as a political point. I think it's good to see that sense of nationalism in young people, because often when I travel out, my peer group ministers, they don't have that same degree of optimism in their societies.
So the thing is that, while Prime Minister is ready for his next term and is preparing those 100 days for the most tough decisions to be taken, in MEA, what kind of tough decisions are you looking at for the future?
Well, I think it's our job right now to come up with a set of options. Okay, actually that's the way Prime Minister Modi works anyway. His not just for 100 days, generally in any situation, he first wants somebody to say, okay, analyze the situation, give me the options. Now, please debate the pros and cons. So we are working right now in looking at a whole range of options. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see. Government will form. Once the government forms, there will be a method by which, these will be put forward to the Prime Minister and the senior members of the government, whoever they are in that government. And then we'll take it out from there. But right now, I won't say, I won't talk about the options that we are looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Minister.
Well, thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you, doctors.
Namaskar.
It's a great pleasure.
Namaskar.